Welcome everyone to the first ever Commander Challenge Top 10 list. I have wanted to do a Top 10 list episode since this channel was born around 4 years ago, but I never wanted to do this list alone. So I found 4 really amazing content creators. First, the higher plane of learning in the game of Commander, EDH Academy. Then there's the place where all things Commander come to life. Create Commander. The unstoppable lightning strike of the uncensored Unsummoned Skull.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Rowe, also known as J-Rowe and the Unsummoned Skull. I'm a teacher, professor, tutor, and streamer making primarily Commander and Oathbreaker content, and specializing in all things Unsummoned, as that is my favorite card and effect.
And finally, one of our very own patrons, and the place where all things pristine, mint, and expensive reside, Neo Royal House of Pricey Cardboard.
Welcome to BT Game Night. My name is Philip and I run the YouTube channel Neo Royal House of Pricey Cardboard. We are an EDH focused channel releasing high quality edited gameplay videos every week, currently on Thursdays. Sometimes we try out other kind of content, but it's mainly gameplays. I try and improve the quality of our editing constantly, and I think it shows if you go back a couple of months ago on the channel's library. We are playing optimized deck, not too casual, not too cutthroat. It's a great time. I hope you give us a look, and thank you to BT for inviting us for this group project.
Together with yours truly, BT, we are the EDHCC Allies. Oh yeah. And today we are proud to present to you our top 10 most annoying cards to face in a game of EDH. Now remember, this is our list, and only our collective opinions. We are not in any way attacking anyone's playstyle. As EDH may be the most popular format in Magic the Gathering currently, it is still both the competitive and casual format, and people can enjoy this lovely game as they wish. Also, everyone's top 10 will never be the same. So if your picks don't make our list, let us know in the comments below what your top 10 list is. I read and respond to all comments, and I'm sure my allies will gladly do the same. Now then, before we get into the top 10, let's check out 3 honorable mentions.
This is Zainab of the EDH Academy, and the first of our honorable mentions is Seedborne Muse. For 3 green, you get a 2/4 spirit that reads, untap all permanents you control during each player's untap step. So what this means is that if you have flash, that means whatever cards you have in your hand, you will always have access to your full mana base, both lands and non-lands, to be able to cast the spells from your hand. If you have any mana sinks or permanents that require you to put mana into it to get an effect, not only will you have all of your permanents untapped to be able to tap to activate any of them, but you will have your full mana base available to you to be able to pay as much mana as you possibly can to get as much value as possible from those mana sink effects. Some popular mana sinks that you will see in the format are both Kenrith the Return King and Golos Tireless Pilgrim. These decks are normally built around running your favorite cards or your favorite powerful synergies, and then having Seedborne Muse in the deck to be able to untap during your opponent's turns, to be able to use your commander's activated abilities during other people's turn to attempt to outpace the rest of your pod and be able to close out the game that much quicker.
In EDH, there are quite a few strategies that aren't the most fun to play against, including such things as land destruction, don't worry, we'll get to that later, hand destruction, and mill. But one playstyle that garners a great deal of dislike from casual players is Infect. Namely because it only requires 10 points of damage to beat a player. And compared to, say, 15 years ago, In today's game, there is a ton of support cards that makes Infect broken. And one of the most powerful cards in that regard is Triumph of the Hordes. It is a 4 CMC sorcery card with 2 green and 2 colorless that basically says, until end of turn, you grant all of your creatures +1/+1, trample, and infect. I mean, the flavor text of this card should be, "We are not paid by the hour." This card is extremely nasty in any combat-based strategy that uses green and wants to end the game quickly and suddenly. I especially see this card in tribal decks, such as Elves, Hydras, and Saprolinks. Also, this card is especially deadly in Swarm-style token decks, or +1/+1 counter strategies. Long story short, outside of cards like Craterhoof Behemoth and Tooth and Nail, this card is easily one of Green's biggest and best finishing moves.
For the last honorable mention, we have Smothering Tide, an enchantment for 3 generic and a white that reads, whenever an opponent draws a card, that player may pay 2. If the player doesn't, you create a treasure token. At this point, I think everybody played against it, and while yes, it's a powerful white card, which we need more of, it doesn't really feel like the mono-white savior to me, as any color combination with white will gain from running it. Commander is the format of value engines and big turns, so unlike Rhystic Study, where you can play 1 big spell per turn and pay the 1 mana tax, you cannot realistically pay 2 mana for every card you draw, including the one from your draw step. If this comes down on 3 with the help of a ramp, nobody will spend half of their available mana to deny 1 treasure to 1 opponent. Combine that with the single white in its cost, the fact that treasure makes any color of mana, and wheel decks being everywhere, and you've got quite the problematic card.
Number 10 on the list of most offensive commander cards is Altar of Dementia. Altar of Dementia is a 2-mana colorless artifact that costs 2 generic mana and can go into any deck. The card has an activated ability that requires the owner to sacrifice a creature to mill a target opponent for an amount of cards equal to the creature's power. It can be activated on any player's turn at instant speed. With the removal of damage on the stack, the Altar's ability has become easier to resolve, although there are still points of confusion. For example, sacrificing the creature in combat can be done after the creature was declared as a blocker, allowing additional value to be gained from a chump blocker. It can also be activated during a player's upkeep, after a card was placed there from a scry or tutor, but before that card could be drawn. One of the bigger issues with Altar is how it plays, more so than what it does. Milling itself can draw the ire of a table because people want to play their cards, not watch them get dumped into the graveyard. A more egregious gameplay situation occurs when the ability to sacrifice creatures at instant speed is used to threaten the table. Jump blockers mill the attacking player out of spite. Wrath effects are punished with mill. Profitable blocks become mill. Putting cards on top of the library just allows them to be milled away. Unlike more oppressive cards, Altar allows the illusion of choice, but that just makes it even more cruel. From a flavor perspective, milling is a solid effect to serve as a representation of dementia, as the library represents memories and dementia causes a person to lose memories and connections. What isn't clear is how the creatures factor into it. How do they make a person forget? And how can dementia ever be considered a good thing? While Altar can be stifling, it can also be an exciting card that rewards innovation. Altar can break board stalls by enabling hyper-aggressive lines where suicide attacks result in mill, or where combat tricks are foiled. For example, a fog in response to an all-out game-ending attack does nothing to stop the army from being used to mill. Additionally, Altar can be used to mill its owner, enabling a clever player to load their graveyard such that the grave functions as another hand.
Hey everyone, Brandon here with Create Commander, about to introduce you to the number 9 card on our list of annoying cards. When this card hits the table, it definitely humbles you and your board state. It makes you think pretty lowly of your board state until it leaves, because it's got to go. It makes everything meek. It's called Humility. 2 white for an enchantment from Tempest that simply reads, each creature loses all abilities and is a 1/1 creature. All your Angry Omnath tokens and Omnath just became 1/1s. Your Thrasioses, Galta, Feather, Muldrotha, 1/1s that do nothing. Golos, yeah, 0 ability and a 1/1. Heck, this thing even, it's so mean it even turns off your Birds of Paradise. Now granted, it gives a little bit of power, but it takes away its flying. When this card hits the table, everyone just gets to stare at each other with a boatload of 1/1s that will basically trade if anyone attacks. Now, the visual of an Ulamog duking it out with the equivalent of a Goblin token is hilarious, but I believe its inclusion on this list stems from one thing. Commander games are typically longer than other formats. Cards like this one slow the game down considerably unless someone has an immediate answer. There are plenty of decks where this card has a home. It can take a deck and catch up or slug out a victory with the right setup, but just playing the card to extend the game, man, that's just mean.
Where we hit the books to study for the big test within the Rhystic Study. For 2 and a blue, we get an enchantment that states, whenever an opponent casts a spell, you may draw 1 card unless the player pays 1. This card's floor is actually pretty darn high as far as commander cards go, because at its worst, it taxes your opponents for 1 mana for each spell that they try to cast, and in the early game, when you're trying to set up, that could be really devastating if you're trying to keep your opponents from getting free cards. However, if your opponents are choosing to not pay the extra 1 for the Rhystic Study, you are drawing cards simply for them trying to play the game. And that's why a lot of the times you're going to hear moans at the table, because you're trying to either set up or keep up with your opponents who are ramping and establishing their game plan, but yours are being done with either a 1 mana tax or you're giving opponent a free card. So with Rhystic Study, there is no drawback for your opponent, and you're really trying to pick the worst of 2 evils when it comes to either ruining your momentum and developing your board state, or allowing your opponent to get even more resources to advance their own.
On number 7, we have Constant Mist, my personal addition to the top 10. Constant Mist is an instant for a generic and a green that reads, creatures deal no combat damage this turn. Buy back, sacrifice a land. In Magic, we have 3 main strategies: aggro, combo, and control. Everything else is basically a mix of those 3. The way our format is ruled, we have 3 opponents at 40 lives, so that makes 120 life to take down if you were to kill the table by yourself. This puts the aggro strategy at a massive disadvantage in power level, as combo do not care how much life your opponents have, they just go infinite, and we have plenty of combos and tutors to do so. While you, the combat deck, still have to deal with summoning sickness and blockers with 3 opponents. So how is that related to Constant Mist? Well, I would suggest that Constant Mist is one of the worst cards you can face as a combat deck. Buying back a 2 mana instant by sacrificing a land is so easy in Commander, where games give you time to set up and where land strategy are a very popular and powerful style of play. The only thing you need is a way to play your land back from your graveyard, and you have effectively taken out the combat deck of the game with 1 2 mana card. So as a lover of combat decks, I find Constant Mist extremely cheesy and easy to take out the already behind style of play that is combat. Play Moment's Peace. 2 fogs is enough to save you from the big Craterhoof plays.
Surprisingly, only 1 creature made it onto our top 10 list. And this was a super hard choice. We narrowed it down to 3 creatures: Kenrith, the Returned King, Golos, Tireless Pilgrim, and the infamous Zur the Enchanter. All top-tier generals in their own right, and all super degenerate. Now in a 1v1 setting, I'd say the winner would be Zur, since having a counterspell or two set up to stop a single opponent from interfering with your plan is easy peasy lemon squeezy. But in a 4-player game, chances are you'll not get a single swing off with this guy when people know what you'll likely put into play with it. Next, Kenrith is brutal in both 1v1 and multiplayer, but requires a decent amount of ramp and even a mana doubler before you can really start to abuse its numerous abilities. Which is why we named Golos our number 6. Why? Because color-wise, he's the easiest thing to bring out with 5 colorless mana. And he's the only one who increases your board state immediately just by casting him. And with lands like Field of the Dead, Gaia's Cradle, Maze of Ith, Maze's End, and the forthcoming World Tree, that one ability is already broken and can be worse when combined with blink effects. But we haven't even spoken about his other ability. For 7 mana, including Wooburg, you can exile your top 3 cards and cast them for free. Free! And that's what makes Golos annoying to play against, because chances are you're going to get at least one card that will greatly change the game in your favor, if not win it for you altogether. And I've seen everything from Mindslaver to Time Stretch, Reshape the Earth, Ugin the Spirit Dragon, to even Tooth and Nail come off this guy, and then the game ends shortly thereafter. He is the commander that requires the least amount of effort and strategy to make effective. One crazy card comes off of him and boom goes a dynamite. Enough said.
Number 5 on the list of most offensive commander cards is Rest in Peace. Rest in Peace is a 2-mana enchantment that costs 1 mana of any color and 1 white mana. When it enters the battlefield, all graveyards are exiled, and as long as it remains on the battlefield, cards going to the graveyard are exiled instead as a replacement effect. Exiling graveyards when it enters the battlefield can be a tricky effect, particularly when factoring in constellation and adjacent effects. If a creature would die as a result of the enchantment entering, it dies before the enchantment enters and then is exiled. The graveyard replacement effect can be difficult to resolve as well. If its owner pulls from Eternity an exiled card, the card goes to the graveyard, Rest in Peace then exiles it. So did the card ever actually go to the graveyard? Would it trigger Tormod for a creature leaving the grave? The rules problems surrounding Rest in Peace pale in comparison to the negative gameplay impact the card has. Plenty of popular decks use the graveyard as a resource, such as Reanimator, Flashback, and Aristocrats decks. Rest in Peace comes down early and warps the game around itself. Enchantment removal is rare out of those decks, so they turn to play removal in order to get their deck to even function, which is not necessarily a healthy environment. There are also flavor issues. What does it mean that something is resting in peace? Does it mean that the soul was removed? If soul, then why does it affect all cards? What does Rest in Peace even look like on the battlefield? Then factor in the Vorthos element. The Gideon spellbook printing references the death of a popular character. The secret layer shows a dead dog. The symbolism couldn't be clearer. This card kills games. That's not to say there aren't fair uses. Rest in Peace by itself isn't proactive, but there are clever combinations that can make the card do more than stifle creativity. For example, Gravestorm requires an opponent to exile a card from their grave to prevent you from drawing an extra card, but Rest in Peace prevents them from having cards to exile, creating a Phyrexian arena without a drawback.
Earlier, I stated that land destruction isn't all that fun to play against, because lands are like the money in your wallet, and it sucks to be broke. To be fair, in the majority of competitive or casual decks, you'll likely see one land card like Strip Mine that destroys another land, or a spell like Beast Within with a drawback that can take out a permanent, including a land. There are quite a few spells that take out your lands, like these, for example, but they don't see much play due to their high CMC costs. However, for our number 4 spot, there's one card that sees a decent amount of play, and it's painful to deal with. This card is Armageddon. It's a 4 CMC sorcery, which includes 2 white and 2 colorless, which simply destroys all lands in play, aka a Wrath of God for lands. The only reason why this card didn't make it higher on the list is because most players who use it have a seriously good reason for doing so. And that is they know 2 things. 1, based on the general they play, that they'll be the arch enemy on the table if it's a multiplayer. Or 2, that once their general starts attacking, they'll have no need for lands as their general usually cheats other cards into play, and that by using this card, it can stop the rest of the table from disrupting their board states for at least a few turns, until it's almost too late to stop them. I'm trying to be positive when I say that, because to be honest, that's about 40% of the time I see the card played. The other 60% are players who fall into one of 3 categories. 1, they're trying to stall the game out to buy time. 2, they're about to scoop and decide to do some damage before they decide to leave the table on the way out. And 3, a combination of 1 and 2. Again, to be positive, there does exist some worse cards in Armageddon. To be honest, at this point, I'm just glad that Balance is still banned.
Zidon for the EDH Academy here to discuss another blue card. This one has a double-edged sword, but unfortunately, both blades point to you. So at the number 3 slot, we have Expropriate. For 7 blue, we have a sorcery. Starting with you, each player votes for time or money. For each time vote, take an extra turn after this one. For each money vote, choose a permanent owned by the voter and gain control of it. Exile Expropriate. This card is easily one of the most infamous extra turn spells in the game, and the infamy is well deserved. You can take up to 4 extra turns in a row depending on how the table votes. And if you decide to not give the player an extra turn, the second edge of this double-edged sword is going to come right back at you, because a permanent of yours is now going to be put under the control of that player. What makes Expropriate even worse for wear is that effects like Protection, Hexproof, and Shroud do nothing to help prevent a permanent of yours being taken control of through Expropriate, and on top of that, it's a permanent. So it's not even like you're only restricted to anything but your lands. They could take your Cabal Coffers, your Nykthos Shrine to Nyx, your Glacial Chasm. There are a lot of things that this card can do, and that's why when you see it on the stack, you're going to hear the groans.
On number 2, we have the color/non-basic 8 enchantments: Contamination, Blood Moon, and Back to Basics. Contamination is an enchantment for 2 and a black that reads, if a land is tapped for mana, it produces a black instead of any other type and amount. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice Contamination unless you sacrifice a creature. Notice that this is not a cumulative upkeep, it's always 1 creature. Blood Moon is another 3 CMC enchantment in red, this time that reads non-basic lands are mountains. And lastly, Back to Basics is a blue 3 CMC enchantment that reads non-basic lands don't untap during their controller's untap steps. So, before I give you a little more detail as why it's on this list, I just want to say that we understand why these cards exist in the game and that they make sense in a competitive environment to punish multicolored decks. That being said, I don't think that punishing multicolored decks should be the main goal of casual Commander players. Contamination is by far the biggest offender here because it doesn't spare basic lands, and the upkeep cost of sacrificing a single creature in mono black is basically non-existent. Just like Stasis, you could hold this effect for basically forever with a minimal setup. After that, Blood Moon and Back to Basics shut down the non-basics. And the reason why I dislike these cards is that nobody in the Commander community teach new players to build with a majority of basics. All we see are those amazing deck lists with shock lands, battle bond lands, original duels even. So newcomers build their decks with basic at first, then upgrade their mana base over time with shock lands and whatnot to stop being color screw. And then, you shut them down of playing their 5-color dragon precon, saying multicolor decks should be punished? I disagree. What should be punished is big powerful lands like Gaia's Cradle and Cabal Coffers. These should be your main target with cards like Strip Mine or the new Cleansing Wildfire from Zendikar Rising. Once again, it makes sense in a competitive environment, less in a casual one.
Hey everyone, Brandon from Create Commander back to reveal the number 1 slot of most annoying cards we have played in Commander. When it came time to pick one of these to fill the top spot, it was so hard that all of us, we just couldn't agree. So we lumped them all 3 together and made it a 3-way tie for first place. I know, cop out, right? But we just genuinely couldn't choose one. Seriously. First I'll introduce the cards and then explain why we find them annoying. Winter Orb is a 2 CMC artifact. The Eternal Masters version text reads, as long as Winter Orb is untapped, players can't untap more than 1 land during their untap steps. Okay. Next is Static Orb. This is a 3 CMC artifact, and the Kaladesh Inventions text reads, as long as Static Orb is untapped, players can't untap more than 2 permanents during their untap steps. Oi. Finally, the 5th edition version of this card says, each player skips his or her untap phase. During your upkeep, pay blue or bury Stasis. I'm sure you were all wondering if this one was coming, and I don't think it could be an annoying EDH cards list without any of these 3, honestly. So, why do we find them annoying? Because we like to actually play our
Whoa! That was the loudest profanity I've ever heard. Anyway, that's our list, guys. We hope you enjoyed it. Let us know what your top 10 lists are in the comments down below. As you can see, top 10 lists always invoke passion, and because it's mostly a delicate subject based on people's playstyles within the MTG community. I want to give a quick shout out once again to the 4 tag team partners who helped make this video possible and took time out of their busy schedules, even in these rough times, to work with me. Of course, I'm talking about EDH Academy, Create Commander, Unsummoned Skull, and my boy Neo Royal, House of Pricey Cardboard. There'll be links to all their socials in the links below. Go give them some love like you've been doing for me all this time. Speaking of love, I just want to say, guys, thank you so much for sticking with me on this crazy journey of mine. We've only just begun. There's so much more things I want to show you, including next month, we'll be starting our first ever EDHCC patron tournament, so look forward to that. And if you haven't already, help me reach my next goal of 2,000 subscribers. We're getting so close. So if you haven't already, smash the subscribe button, smash the like button. If we reach 36 likes in this video, there will be another top 10 video in the future. Also, if you enjoy our content, consider becoming a patron. Give you access to some sweet bonuses like having bonus entries into giveaways, entries into our future tournaments, and having your name at the end of each and every episode with your own selected nickname as part of our EDHCC club. Well, that'll be all for this week. I'm your host, BT. Thank you so much for watching. And stay warm, stay safe, and keep on card gaming. Love you guys.